Most people believe change is hard. They wake up each day thinking they are simply a product of their past, shaped by childhood, genetics, and years of habits that seem impossible to break. They feel trapped by the same emotions, the same thoughts, the same reactions, playing out again and again like a script they can't rewrite. It feels as if their personality is fixed, their behaviors automatic, and their future predetermined. But what if all of that is based on a misunderstanding of how the brain really works? In Evolve Your Brain, Dr. Joe Dispenza opens the door to a different truth. Change is not only possible, it is the natural function of the human brain. Your mind is not hardwired. It is a living, adapting, evolving network capable of creating entirely new patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior. The question is not whether your brain will change, but whether you will take charge of that change or let it unfold unconsciously, shaped by old experiences and limiting beliefs. This is not just theory. It's neuroscience. Every thought you think strengthens certain neural pathways. Every emotion you feel fires chemical signals that reinforce those patterns. Over time, these mental habits become so familiar that they feel like you. But they are not you. They are just well-rehearsed responses, repeated so often that they become automatic. When you understand this, a profound realization emerges. By choosing different thoughts and emotions, and repeating them with purpose, you can rewire your brain and reshape your reality. For most people, the past dictates the future. They think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, and make the same choices, all of which produce the same experiences. This is why change feels difficult. It requires breaking the cycle. It requires stepping into the unknown, where the brain must forge new connections and let go of old, familiar ones. This process isn't easy, but it is entirely natural. The brain is designed to adapt. The same mechanism that once programmed limiting habits can now be used to create liberation and growth. Dr. Dispenza doesn't offer shallow motivation or quick fixes. He offers a deep, scientific understanding of how thought and emotion shape the brain's physical structure. He explains why willpower alone often fails and why lasting change requires a deliberate rewiring of the mind. It's not enough to want to change. You must train your brain to think and feel in alignment with the future you desire, not the past you regret. This understanding leads to a powerful truth. You are not a victim of your biology. Your biology is a reflection of your thoughts and emotions, both the conscious and the unconscious. When you change your mind, you change your brain. And when you change your brain, you change your body, your habits, your behaviors, and ultimately your life. If you've ever felt stuck in repetitive cycles, if you've ever wondered why change feels so difficult despite your best intentions, if you've sensed that there must be a deeper way to break free from old patterns and create a new reality, this journey will give you not just the answers, but the tools. What follows is not just knowledge. It's a roadmap to becoming the conscious creator of your mind and, therefore, your future. And it begins with understanding how your brain evolved not to keep you the same, but to help you grow. Part 1. Understanding the biology of change. Change does not begin with action. It begins with understanding. Dr. Joe Dispenza starts by taking us deep into the biology of the brain, not to overwhelm us with science, but to reveal the hidden patterns shaping our lives. For most people, the brain seems like a mystery. We know it controls thought, memory, emotion, but how it creates the experience of self, and how it can be changed, remains vague. Dispenza makes it clear. The brain is not a static organ. It is a dynamic, constantly evolving system designed to learn, adapt, and grow. Every experience we have changes the structure of the brain. Neurons, the cells responsible for transmitting information, are constantly forming new connections. The phrase, neurons that fire together wire together, explains how habits are built. When you think a thought or perform an action repeatedly, the neural pathways responsible for that thought or action become stronger. Over time, they become the default. This is how we learn to drive, to speak, to walk, but it's also how we learn to feel anxious in certain situations, to react with anger, or to fall into patterns of self-doubt. The brain does not distinguish between constructive and destructive habits. It simply reinforces whatever we repeat. This is where the concept of neuroplasticity becomes essential. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience. It's why learning is possible at any age. It's why recovery from injury can occur even when damage seems irreversible. And it's why change is always within reach, no matter how long certain habits have been in place. Dispenza emphasizes that the brain's flexibility is both a blessing and a curse. Without awareness, we strengthen patterns that limit us. With awareness, we can create patterns that liberate us. But the brain does not operate in isolation. Every thought produces chemical signals that affect the body. Emotions are not just feelings. They are physical events. When you experience fear, for example, the brain triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals prepare the body to respond to danger. But when fear becomes chronic, when the brain keeps firing the same fear-based thoughts even in the absence of real threats, those chemicals continue to circulate, creating wear and tear on the body. Over time, this leads to stress-related illnesses, fatigue, and even changes in gene expression. The same process applies to other emotions. Repeated feelings of anger, guilt, or sadness keep the body in a state of imbalance. The emotional past becomes a biological present. This is why many people feel trapped. They are not just stuck mentally. Their bodies have become conditioned to repeat the emotional patterns of the past. The brain sends signals to the body reinforces those signals, and a feedback loop is created. Breaking that loop requires more than positive thinking. It requires changing both the mind and the body at a fundamental level. Dispenza introduces a powerful concept. Most people live in a state of survival. Their thoughts and emotions are dominated by fear, competition, lack, and the need for control. In this state, the brain's energy is focused on the external world, on reacting to circumstances, avoiding threats, and maintaining the familiar. Growth, creativity, and transformation are all suppressed. To evolve, we must shift from survival to creation. We must stop letting the environment dictate our internal state and start using the mind to change the brain. This shift begins with awareness. By observing your thoughts and emotions without judgment, you start to see the patterns that have been running unconsciously. You begin to recognize the triggers that keep you anchored to the past. And in that recognition, you create space. Space to pause. Space to choose a different response. Space to think a new thought. At first, this process feels unnatural. The old neural pathways are strong. The body is addicted to the familiar chemistry of the past. Change feels uncomfortable because the brain resists uncertainty. But discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that the brain is rewiring itself. The neurons responsible for old patterns begin to fire less frequently. New connections start to form. With repetition, what once felt unfamiliar becomes the new familiar. This is the foundation of all transformation. Change the mind, and the brain changes. Change the brain, and the body follows. Change the body, and behavior shifts. Change behavior, and life transforms. And it all begins with understanding that you are not at the mercy of the past. You are not a victim of your biology. You are the author of your thoughts, the designer of your brain, and the creator of your future. Part 2. Breaking the habit of being yourself. By now, it's clear that the brain's flexibility, its neuroplasticity, is both the key to change and the reason so many people feel trapped. As Dr. Joe Dispenza explains, we unconsciously rehearse the same thoughts, feelings, and behaviors every day until they form what feels like a fixed identity. Over time, this identity becomes a habit. We wake up in the same mood, follow the same routines, think the same thoughts about ourselves and the world. Before long, we aren't just living a life. We are repeating one. Dispenza challenges this cycle by asking a provocative question. What if the self you believe is permanent is actually just a collection of rehearsed patterns? Thoughts like, I'm not good enough, emotions like fear or frustration, and behaviors like procrastination or people-pleasing don't define who you are. They reflect who you've practiced being. Most people try to change their lives without changing themselves. They want new outcomes, better health, relationships, success, but they keep thinking and feeling in ways that belong to their past. The brain, conditioned by repetition, pulls them back into familiar patterns even when their conscious mind desires something different. This is why change feels so difficult. The body and mind resist the unfamiliar because the known, even when it's painful or limiting, feels safe. To break the habit of being yourself, You must disrupt the feedback loop between thought, emotion, and behavior. Dispenza emphasizes that this process begins with awareness. You have to observe your own patterns without judgment. Notice the moments when you slip into old thinking. Pay attention to the emotional triggers that draw you back into familiar moods. This is not about criticizing yourself. It's about seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time, how deeply the past controls the present. Awareness creates choice. Once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. You can choose a new thought, even if it feels awkward at first. You can practice new emotions, gratitude instead of resentment, curiosity instead of fear. You can experiment with new behaviors, taking small actions that align with the person you want to become rather than the person you've been. But the mind and body won't always cooperate willingly. The old self has been rehearsed for years. It will try to reclaim control. Negative thoughts will surface. Old emotions will rise. Dispenza calls this the breakdown before the breakthrough. When you challenge familiar patterns, the brain and body resist. But this resistance is not failure. It is the brain rewiring itself in real time. Persistence is essential. Change is not a single decision but a daily practice. Each time you think a new thought, feel a new emotion, or take a new action, you weaken the old neural connections and strengthen new ones. Over time, the unfamiliar becomes familiar. The new self replaces the old self not through force, but through repetition. Dispenza also highlights the importance of envisioning the future self. You must not only stop rehearsing the past, but start rehearsing the future. Visualization becomes a tool for priming the brain to accept new patterns. When you consistently imagine yourself thinking, feeling, and behaving as the person you want to become, you prepare your brain and body to embody that identity in real life. This is not wishful thinking. It's applied neuroscience. The brain does not distinguish between real and vividly imagined experiences. When you visualize new ways of being, the same neural pathways begin to form as they would through actual experience. The more detailed and emotionally charged the visualization, the more powerfully it influences the brain's wiring. In breaking the habit of being yourself, you are not losing who you are. You are releasing who you are not. You are shedding the layers of identity formed by unconscious patterns and choosing to create yourself consciously. This is the path from survival to creation, from reaction to intention, from living as a predictable past to becoming the architect of an unpredictable, extraordinary future. And the journey has only just begun. Part 3. How thoughts become biology to truly change. It's not enough to alter behavior at the surface level. Dr. Joe Dispenza reveals a deeper connection, one that explains why thoughts and emotions don't just shape how we feel temporarily but create lasting biological changes in the body itself. The mind and body are not separate. They are intertwined in a continuous conversation, and that dialogue shapes everything from mood to health to the expression of your very genes. Each thought triggers a cascade of chemical signals in the brain. Positive thoughts can stimulate the production of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, creating feelings of happiness and reward. Negative thoughts often stimulate stress chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, the thoughts we think most frequently establish a kind of chemical personality. They condition the body to expect certain emotional states. When people repeatedly think thoughts of anxiety, anger, or sadness, their brains release stress hormones so consistently that the body becomes accustomed, some would even say addicted, to those emotional states. In this way, emotions stop being reactions to external events and become self-sustaining internal habits. The body learns to crave the chemistry it knows, even when that chemistry is damaging. This is why people often feel drawn to situations or relationships that reinforce familiar, even painful, emotional patterns. The mind may desire change, but the body clings to the known. But the influence doesn't stop with neurotransmitters and hormones. Dispenza explains that repeated emotional states also affect gene expression. The science of epigenetics shows that while our genes provide the blueprint for biological function, the environment, including the internal environment of thoughts and emotions, determines how those genes are expressed. Chronic stress can activate genes related to disease and suppress those related to health and healing. Positive emotional states can have the opposite effect, promoting resilience and repair. In other words, your repeated thoughts and emotions are constantly shaping your biology at a cellular level. Your mind is not simply riding in the vehicle of your body. It is driving the very processes that keep the body alive and functioning, or, in the case of negative patterns, struggling and declining. This understanding carries both a warning and a promise. The warning is clear. Unchecked negative thinking can literally make you sick, not just emotionally but physically. But the promise is far more powerful. By changing your thoughts and emotions, you can not only change how you feel, you can change how your body operates, how your brain functions, and even how your genes behave. This is the foundation of mind-body transformation. It's not magic. It's biology. What you consistently think and feel becomes your state of being. And over time, that state of being becomes your health, your energy, and your potential. To evolve your brain is to evolve your biology. And this realization turns every thought, every emotional reaction, into a choice, a chance to reinforce the patterns of the past or to create the chemistry of the future. Part 4. The science of neuroplasticity and habit change. At the core of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work is the idea that the brain's greatest gift is its ability to change itself. This capacity, neuroplasticity, is not just a scientific term. It's the biological foundation for personal transformation. For much of human history, scientists believed the brain became largely fixed after childhood. But modern neuroscience has revealed that the brain remains adaptable throughout life, capable of rewiring itself in response to new experiences, new thoughts, and new choices. Dispenza explains that every time you learn something new, you create new neural connections. When you repeat that learning, through thought, action, or emotion, those connections become stronger. Eventually, they form networks that support new skills, new habits, and even new ways of thinking and feeling. This is how both positive and negative habits are formed. The more often a thought or behavior is repeated, the more deeply it is wired into the brain's structure. Habits become automatic not because they are unchangeable, but because the brain prioritizes efficiency. Once a pattern is established, it requires less energy to maintain. That's why breaking old habits feels difficult. It's not that change is impossible. It's that the brain resists spending energy on unfamiliar patterns when it can rely on well-established ones. But neuroplasticity means that no pattern is permanent. The same process that created old habits can be used to replace them with new ones. This requires consistent effort and repetition, not because the brain is stubborn, but because rewiring takes time. New neural pathways must be reinforced until they become stronger than the old ones. Dispenza emphasizes that changing habits isn't just about willpower. It's about understanding how the brain learns and adapts. Willpower can initiate change, but without creating new neural pathways, the old habits will eventually reassert themselves. This is why people often revert to past behaviors even after making conscious decisions to change. The key is to combine conscious intention with consistent practice. Visualization is a powerful tool in this process. When you vividly imagine yourself acting and thinking in new ways, the brain begins to form the neural connections associated with those behaviors, even before you take physical action. This primes the brain to accept change and makes it easier to adopt new habits in real life. Emotion also plays a critical role. The stronger the emotional intensity connected to a new thought or behavior, the more likely the brain is to prioritize and reinforce that neural pathway. This is why major life events, both positive and negative, often lead to rapid changes in behavior and thinking. But you don't have to wait for external events. You can create emotional significance through focused attention and intentional practice. Ultimately, neuroplasticity empowers you to become the architect of your own mind. You are not doomed to repeat the patterns of the past. You can teach your brain to support the future you want to create. Every thought, every choice, every act of awareness becomes part of a larger process of transformation. Change is not an event. It is a practice. And through that practice, the brain evolves. Not by accident, but by design. Part 5. The role of emotion in lasting change. While thoughts create the blueprint for change, emotion provides the fuel. Dr. Joe Dispenza emphasizes that emotion is not just a response to experience. It is a key driver of neuroplasticity and habit formation. Without emotional engagement, new thoughts remain intellectual exercises. With emotion, they become catalysts for lasting transformation. Most people underestimate the power of emotion because they see it as something fleeting or reactive. But every emotion is a biochemical signal. When you feel fear, anger, joy, or love, your brain releases specific chemicals that not only influence your immediate state but also reinforce the neural pathways associated with the thoughts and behaviors that produce that emotion. In this way, emotion solidifies learning and habit formation. This explains why strong emotional experiences, both positive and negative, are easier to remember and more likely to influence future behavior. It also explains why breaking old patterns can be difficult. If a negative habit, like self-criticism or fear-based thinking, has been reinforced by years of emotional repetition, it becomes deeply embedded not only in the brain but also in the body's chemistry. The body becomes conditioned to expect and even crave the familiar emotions of the past. Dispenza introduces the concept of emotional addiction. Just as the brain can become dependent on substances like caffeine or sugar, it can become addicted to the chemical signals of repeated emotional states. People who frequently experience anger, sadness, or anxiety often find themselves unconsciously seeking out situations that recreate those emotions, not because they enjoy them, but because they feel familiar and safe to the conditioned mind and body. Breaking this cycle requires more than thinking different thoughts. It requires generating new emotions that are as intense and consistent as the old ones. This is why practices like gratitude, compassion, and joy are not just feel-good exercises. They are tools for creating new emotional set points that support change. When positive emotions accompany new thoughts and behaviors, they reinforce the neural connections necessary for transformation. Visualization becomes even more powerful when infused with emotion. It's not enough to imagine yourself acting differently or achieving new outcomes. You must feel the emotions associated with those future experiences. By doing so, you teach the brain and body to expect and prepare for that new reality. The brain begins to release the same chemicals it would if the imagined events were actually happening, making the desired change feel more real and attainable. Dispenza also highlights the importance of emotional regulation. Change involves uncertainty, and uncertainty often triggers fear or doubt. Cultivating the ability to observe these emotions without being controlled by them is essential. Mindfulness practices, deep breathing, and conscious reflection can help calm the body's stress response and keep you aligned with your goals even when old emotional patterns try to resurface. In the process of change, emotion is both the anchor and the sail. It can keep you tethered to the past or propel you toward the future. By consciously choosing which emotions to cultivate and which to release, you take control of the most powerful force driving your transformation. The mind initiates change, but the heart makes it last. Part 6. Creating the future self. At this point, the journey shifts from understanding how change happens to actively designing the person you want to become. Dr. Joe Dispenza makes it clear, true transformation is not about fixing the past. It's about creating a new future. And that future begins with a clear, intentional vision of the self you are ready to embody. Most people unknowingly live by memory. They wake up and immediately recall who they were yesterday, the same thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. In doing so, they create their present reality as a continuation of the past. The brain, conditioned by years of repetition, reinforces this continuity. Without a conscious decision to break the pattern, yesterday simply repeats itself today. Dispenza teaches that the key to creating the future self is shifting from memory to imagination. The brain's ability to imagine is not just a creative gift. It is a neurological tool for change. When you vividly picture yourself thinking, feeling, and acting as the person you want to become, you activate the same neural networks that would be engaged if those experiences were real. Over time, these imagined experiences begin to shape the brain's structure and influence behavior in daily life. But vision alone is not enough. To create the future self, you must also align your emotions and actions with that vision. This means cultivating the feelings associated with your desired identity. Confidence, gratitude, joy, not as future rewards but as present states of being. The brain and body begin to believe the future is happening now, reinforcing the neural and chemical patterns that support the new self. This process requires consistency. The old self has been rehearsed for years. The new self must be rehearsed daily. Visualization, affirmations, and intentional behavior become practices not just for motivation but for neurological conditioning. Each time you think and feel in alignment with the future self, you weaken the influence of the past and strengthen the reality of the future. Dispenza also emphasizes the importance of action. Thought and emotion prime the brain and body for change, but behavior completes the cycle. Taking small, consistent actions that reflect the future self sends a powerful signal to the brain. This is not just imagination. This is becoming real. These actions don't have to be dramatic. Simple choices, speaking more confidently, treating others with greater compassion, pursuing a new skill, serve as evidence that the transformation is taking root. Resistance will arise. The old self will surface, trying to pull you back into familiar thoughts and emotions. This is not failure. It is part of the process. Each moment of resistance is an opportunity to reaffirm your commitment to the new self. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes natural. The unfamiliar becomes the familiar. The imagined becomes the experienced. By creating the future self with clarity, emotion, and action, you take control of your personal evolution. You stop being a passive product of past experiences and become an active participant in shaping who you are becoming. And in that shift, you discover the deepest truth of all. You were never truly stuck. You were only rehearsing who you used to be. Part 7. Becoming the conscious creator of your life. As the old patterns dissolve and the future self takes shape, a profound shift occurs. You move from reacting to life as it happens to consciously creating it. Dr. Joe Dispenza emphasizes that this is not a philosophical idea. It's a biological, neurological, and emotional reality. The same brain that once memorized survival patterns now becomes the instrument of intentional design. Most people live unconsciously, repeating familiar thoughts and emotions while believing they have little control over what unfolds. They see circumstances, relationships, and even their own feelings as things that happen to them. But once you understand how the brain, body, and mind interact, this belief dissolves. You begin to see that the experiences you attract, the emotions you feel, and the actions you take are not random. They are reflections of the internal patterns you maintain or transform. Becoming the conscious creator of your life means choosing your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors deliberately. It means observing the old self without judgment and gently but firmly replacing it with a new self each day. It means understanding that while external circumstances may be unpredictable, your internal state does not have to be. Dispenza encourages the development of daily rituals that reinforce this creative power. Meditation becomes not just a practice of relaxation but a laboratory for change. In meditation, you rehearse new thoughts and emotions. You observe the mind's tendency to wander back to the past and, with gentle persistence, bring it back to the present vision of who you are becoming. Gratitude becomes a daily state of being, not reserved for when things go right, but cultivated in advance of the outcomes you desire. By feeling gratitude for the future before it arrives, you align your brain and body with the reality you are creating, making it easier for that reality to manifest. Self-reflection becomes a tool for growth rather than self-criticism. When old patterns resurface, as they inevitably will, you see them not as failures but as opportunities to strengthen new neural connections and emotional responses. Action completes the cycle. Each decision, no matter how small, becomes an expression of the future self. The foods you eat, the conversations you engage in, the risks you take, the boundaries you set, all become evidence of your commitment to living consciously rather than automatically. Over time, this approach transforms not just isolated behaviors but your entire identity. You stop identifying with limitations and begin identifying with possibility. You become a person who expects growth, who welcomes change, and who trusts in their capacity to evolve. And perhaps most importantly, you develop resilience. When challenges arise, as they always will, you respond not with old survival reactions but with creativity, curiosity, and clarity. You recognize that obstacles are not signs that change is impossible. They are signs that change is underway. In becoming the conscious creator of your life, you reclaim the power that was always yours. You step out of the shadows of the past and into the light of intentional evolution. You are no longer living by memory. You are living by vision. And in doing so, you are not just changing your mind. You are changing your brain. You are changing your life. Conclusion: rewiring your mind, rewriting your life transformation isn't something that happens to the lucky few. It's the natural outcome for those who understand how thought, emotion, and action shape not only the mind but the very biology of the body. Dr. Joe Dispenza's Evolve Your Brain has shown us that change is not a distant possibility. It is a daily practice, a science, and, most importantly, a choice. Your thoughts are not passive. They are creative forces. Your emotions are not random. They are signals that reinforce or challenge the patterns you live by. Your habits are not fixed. They are the result of repetition. Repetition you can disrupt and redesign at any moment. Throughout this journey, we've explored how the brain encodes experience, why the past so often shapes the present, and how awareness becomes the first step toward change. We've seen that while the brain resists uncertainty, it also craves novelty and growth. We've uncovered the power of neuroplasticity, not as an abstract concept but as the very mechanism by which new selves are forged. And we've recognized that emotion is not the enemy of reason, but the ally of lasting change. We've learned that to change your mind is to change your brain, and to change your brain is to change your reality. But knowledge alone is never enough. Application is what transforms understanding into experience. So the question now is not whether change is possible for you. The question is how, and when, you will begin practicing it. Not someday. Not when life gets easier. But now. Who do you choose to become? What thoughts will you rehearse? What emotions will you cultivate? What actions will you take to align with the future you desire? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear which part of this journey spoke most to you and how you plan to apply it starting today. And if this exploration has sparked something in you, I highly recommend diving into the full book Evolve Your Brain by Dr. Joe Dispenza. You'll find a link in the description. This video is only the beginning. The book will guide you deeper into the science and the practices that can help you not just change temporarily, but evolve permanently. If you found this video valuable, share it with someone who's ready to break free from the patterns of the past and step into the power of conscious creation. And don't forget to subscribe to Compact Wisdom, where we distill today's most impactful books into clear, actionable insights designed to help you grow not just your knowledge, but your capacity to lead, create, and thrive. Thank you for watching. And remember, your mind is not a record of what has been. It's a map of what can be.